Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Civil War Regiments Podcast. I'm excited tonight because I'm joined by two fellow living historians who are responsible for a lot of authentic events lately, especially in regards to first section artillery events. Authentic artillery events that have been done and recreated in recent months. Most particularly, we soon got proud, which was a full-scale artillery battalion event, including live firing. It took place in Georgia a few weeks ago. It was incredible. I don't know if anything like that has ever been done before. And for many of us participants, for me, my ancestors were artillery. So for me, it was really a joy to be part of it and to see that many men, cannons, and horses in one place. And that many projectiles firing across the field, and we had targets and everything. So I am pleased to have with me tonight Jeff Baldwin and Mike Jones. They're two of the guys responsible for these events, and you know it's not just them; it's a whole team of people, you know, helping to make these events possible. But they're going to share the background of what it takes to do these type of events, as well as artillery and the horses involved and everything. So with all that being said, Jeff, Mike, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I know as a participant, I'm just so thrilled. I was remarking part of the work that goes into your projects is in the events is having drill weekends and practice weekends. Sure. And so there was multiple events leading up to We Soon Got Proud to get participants prepared and ready. We had manuals to study. We went to these drill weekends where we learned to harness and work with horses. We learned to unlimber and limber guns. You know, we learned without the live firing part, we kind of learned all the basic steps of artillerymen. So I'm deeply appreciate all of that. And I know the guys that I was teamed with all appreciated that because that all paid off to me. I think it's safe to say that event was a crushing success. And I'm sure you guys have heard a plethora of applause from everything afterwards. And so what are some initial thoughts, reactions from you both from the success of an event as large as We Soon Got Proud?
I mean, Jeff and I were talking about this several events ago, and we've got this list of, we call them bucket list events. And this was one of those bucket list events. It's, you know, everybody talked about these kinds of events back in the 90s, and wouldn't it be cool if we could shoot live ammo? And it was, it can't be done. It's just, you know, this, that, and the other. And when we first started talking about this, it was about a 2-year period. When we first started talking about it, Jeff was skeptical too. He was like, can we really pull this off? I thought, it's now or never kind of thing. Because Another thing Jeff always says is people talk about the good old days. These are the good old days. We're kind of in like the perfect storm of, we've got the ability to research these things. We've got the people, we've got the logistics people, we've got the research people, we've got, you know, horse people, gun people. We can put these things together and make them happen. So it's just a matter of saying, let's do it.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, and Jeff,
this was really a dream big event. You know, when, you know, Mike Jones and Andrew Jerem first kind of, you know, presented the idea, you know, and then it was, well, you know, how many guns, how many people, you know, doing a battalion. And then Craig Schneider, you know, also on our core planning group, started talking about, you know, 12 gun detachments. And, you know, my first reaction was, well, that's impossible. There aren't 12 gun detachments in the hobby. There aren't 12 gunners who I'm going to trust with, you know, with live rounds. And then we made it happen. You know, you know, it isn't just me. It isn't just Mike. It isn't just, you know, any one person. It you know, we've really hit a sweet spot with this group where we have so many people. And what I love about the group is, you know, when you start to achieve these things, other people see this. You know, social media has been real big for this group. And, you know, you have people who are sending us say, hey, I see what you're doing. I would like to be part of this. And we've had so many good people come in who've just done a stellar job to make it all come together.
And on that note, post We Soon Got Proud, have you guys received a lot of requests and questions coming in afterwards, guys that are interested in joining something like this in the future? And has that happened?
We had guys in the parking lot saying, I want to do more. What can I do? And this was great. This is the best thing I've ever done. We had a lot of that in the parking lot, and we've continued to get that through our Facebook page. A lot of people contact us through there. But yeah, it's been more of a response than I think I've seen from anything in a long time. Artillery, cavalry, infantry, anything really. It was so above and beyond people's expectation.
Especially, so to prep for this, I was watching the YouTube video montage that you guys put together, where just hearing over and over again, like the cannon going off and hearing the shells screeching over the field, like those are sounds, that I know we remarked the other day, me and some of my friends, like it would have been even cooler if we had somehow microphones down there in the tree line. But, who wants to risk, expensive video and audio equipment down there that would just get crushed and destroyed? But just hearing that is chilling sounds. And it's almost like a Civil War ASMR, just listening to the sounds of these guns going off. So it was really, I enjoyed just being able to have been part of that. And my own ancestor was light artillery. He was in Eufaula, Alabama light artillery. And and I know he was in Dalton. He spent time between Colves Battery and Eufaula Battery, so he was in Dalton 64, and so for me that was a full circle moment for me, and so I know for many guys there, and so you were saying how yes, the authentic community for one too is very small, and and also the amount of men who know how to use a gun properly, but also the amount of capable horsemen, I'm sure. So when you do a large scale event, it's also finding the right men who are able to handle their horses, and horses that are able to handle the kind of work or the kind of noises that you're going to be accustomed to in these events. So I'm sure all that plays a part as well.
Yeah, it definitely takes time to train horses and get them acclimated and what have you. And we've got a lot of guys who've come over from more mainstream. We've got guys who are self-proclaimed mainstreamers that do stuff with us all the time, and they just step up their game. Some guys said, I'm not going to do static artillery ever again. It just doesn't make any sense. And other people have completely revamped their kits to get rid of their older stuff that's kind of mainstream, to bring it up a level. And some of them still do mainstream events, and they go out there and they say they just do a better job of doing mainstream events now because they feel like they've learned so much, and there's so much more to being an artilleryman than making the gun go boom over and over and over again.
Yeah,
I'm grateful for that because I'll be honest with you, I had a bad outlook on our artillery just from mainstream events, because it was just always, the 300-pound dudes or the guys that just roll out their trailers and pull out the guns, and it never looked appealing to me. And my ancestor was artillery, but I never cared to do artillery because I was like, it doesn't even look fun.
Yeah.
But you guys have, by doing it right, attracts attention and inspires us to want to do it right. And honestly, before we go deeper into the event and the workings behind it, I'd love to backtrack a little bit. And first of all, ask you both your interest. Where did you begin your interest? And Jeff, I'll start with you. Where did you find your interest in history, and also where, in particular, did you find that specialty with artillery? When did that begin for you?
Sure. Well, I live in Maryland. I was just telling Stephen, I'm just between South Mountain and Antietam battlefields. Growing up, my great-great-grandfather was a private in 1st South Carolina Cavalry, and all of his letters home were saved. I've seen the originals and I've read the transcriptions. Seeing that there was an interest in history there. About 30 years ago, almost 30 years ago, I was attending a big event, one of the big national events, as a spectator. and ran into some guys from the old Stonewall Brigade, and they talked to me about joining, and a week or two later they followed up, and of course they're following up with a letter in the mail, a printed newsletter. That was how the hobby worked, and I was in, and I did infantry for years as part of the Stonewall Brigade. At some of the events where there would be cannons, I got to meet Kevin Oyarzo, who is really big in artillery over the years. He is one of the core members of our group now. He had done horse-drawn artillery years prior, but was just static. So I started hanging out with him more and more and learning from him. But it was just kind of a now and then thing. Because I live close to Antietam battlefield, I did a lot of volunteer work for the park over the years. And I would show up with my musket, and I would do the one-man, infantry thing for school groups, that kind of stuff. But they also had a cannon detachment. They were short one day, and this 15, 18 years ago, and the ranger asked if I could come in and do it. And I did it, and I loved it. And literally, I got home that night, and I remembered I had a copy of Gillam's Manual for Volunteers, the big version that has the cavalry, and it has the full artillery manual. So I read all of it, and I read it again, and I was digging it. Decided that was what I wanted to do. Went back to Kevin Oyarzo, who got me involved in competition shooting. So I do competition shooting with the North-South Skirmish Association. For those of you who don't know, it's basically a giant shooting club where you shoot Civil War, everything from cannons, mortars, muskets, pistols. The group has been around for a long time. I think they were originally formed in the 1950s. They got a few thousand people and a couple hundred teams, and it just took off from there. So shooting blanks.
You get to have many. We soon got Prouds every other weekend.
yeah. And there's a couple of long distance shoots that I do. But the goal, it was always, Kevin Oyarzo and I used to talk. What if, man, if I won the lottery, I'd have horse-drawn battery, but it never seemed possible. And then I did some events with a group out of Tennessee, Burroughs Battery, Steve Cameron, his group. And I know some of the guys in first section kind of cycled through them. Very mainstream group, great people, and what an opportunity to learn. So started through that. A lot of opportunities to work with the horses. So when we got closer to putting this together, we already had some experienced folks. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Good segue to Mike here. Where did you begin your interest in history, Mike? And also, have you been a horseman all along, or did that come with the hobby, or how did that all start for you, Mike?
I've always been interested in history, and I've been riding since I was a teenager. I had friends who had horses, so we'd go over and help them with barn chores and get free horse rides and that type of thing. So I've been riding for a long time. As far as reenacting riding goes, and I've only been riding for reenacting probably about 12 years or so. I got into reenacting. I was actually at a wargaming convention back before computer games, and we'd go to conventions, and we had wargaming clubs, miniatures, and we did Civil War miniatures and World War II miniatures and what have you. So we did a lot of wargaming, and we'd go to conventions, and somebody showed up to a convention wearing their kit from reenacting. I didn't even know reenacting existed. These guys are walking around the convention floor with their stuff on, and we're like, what's that? We started talking to them, and we were like, well, maybe we'll go to some reenactments, and it'll give us an edge in the gaming world, because we'll be able to see some of this stuff and see how it really works in real life. And then kind of it took over, and wargaming kind of went away. But as far as artillery reenacting, I've only been doing it at first sections, pretty much it. I always just did infantry most of my reenacting career. I got involved in the 80s during the 125ths. and I've been infantry up until, past 10 years or so. And basically it was like you were saying earlier, Steve, it's, the artillery didn't look appealing. It was like where reenactors go to retire. It's like, oh, I'm too old to be an infantry guy, and I'm too old to be a campaigner. I guess I'll just go sit on my cooler and ride the four-wheeler out to the battle and shoot some rounds. And that didn't appeal to me. And I wasn't going to do it unless I felt like I could at least do it pretty right. And I know there were guys like Jeff was talking about. There were guys in the '90s that did a pretty good job with the available research at the time and what they had. Ken Ostenstedt did a great job. Glenn Nally. Trying to think of some of these other guys. John, help me out, Jeff.
Dave Stanley.
Dave Stanley.
Yeah.
So there were some guys, and Kevin Yar was one of them that were doing this stuff back in the '90s as good as you could do it in the '90s. We've just, like we've said before, we're just at that time where everything's kind of come together, and we're able to. We go to research an event, and it's we've got Craig Schneider telling us, okay, well, they had these guys had blue saddle blankets and these guys had red saddle blankets, so it's like we can actually see a unit and see what color blankets their horses were wearing, and duplicate that when we do that unit in the field. So it's pretty cool stuff.
Well, it's amazing how accessible research has really become over the years, and it seems like in the distant past, like it was like, oh, like that's impossible to research this, or it's impossible to look that up. Nobody knows. And now it's like, no, you do know, you can find, and you can track down a lot of this information. That's what's incredible to me. And what I find fascinating for both of you is that doing these type of events is pretty new for you all too. As far as, even though you've been in the hobby for many years,
Sure.
First section is still young of sorts, it seems. And so I'd love from either of you to hear what were the beginnings of first section. When was first section officially began, and how many like events like that have been undergone with you all?
That's like a two-part story. First section.
Yeah.
Dan and I were on a movie shoot, and we were like, oh, we really want to do. It was bucket list for us. We're like, we really want to do horse-drawn artillery and do it right, campaigner style horse-drawn artillery. So Dan and I started buying horses and harness. I went out and bought a cannon, and we were just training horses. And we were shopping around. I was like, we need to find some cannoneers. And we kept trying all these different artillery units, and they were like, oh yeah, you can take our guns out to the battle, but yeah, we don't want to camp like that, and we don't want to march, and we'll just meet you out there. And we were like, we started to give up. We were like, well, maybe we just need to find some campaigner infantry guys who are already campaigners, who've never been able to do artillery, and they'll come be our cannoneers, and we can do the horse stuff, and they can do the cannoneer stuff. And then on the other end of the country, we're doing all this in the southeast, and then a little bit further north, in like Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, there was the LR guys with Jeff Baldwin and I'll let Jeff take over at this point because he can kind of tell you when Harry met Sally. But that's kind of setting it up. But Dan and I were looking for cannoneers, and those guys were looking for horses and horse guys. What was the first event we did, Jeff? It was Richmond, Richmond.
So that was in 2017. But to go back a little earlier, what really changed it is Mike and I first met at the 150th Bentonville.
We met briefly at Bentonville. Yeah.
And I remember, someone introduced us that he had horses, and we had a cannon down there. And as I got to talk to him, we both kind of had the same dream, but Mike lived in Georgia, and the rest of us were in Maryland, Pennsylvania. And, my first thought was, well, that doesn't work. There was still that mindset of the local unit, and you do the hobby with the people around you. And I kick myself now for thinking small. That as soon as you think, okay, well, we're just, and I do consider First Section a national group. We've got people from all over. There was young man from Australia who joined us for Soon Got Proud. But the first time we really came together was on to Richmond event in 2017, and Paul McCurley and Dave Thomas had put together the artillery for that. We brought a gun down, Kevin Oyarzo and I, some of the Liberty Rifles guys, and Mike Jones and Dan Schmealer had brought a horse team, and this was pre-first section. It was the first time we had ever worked together, and it clicked. Our group worked very well with them, and suddenly we're like, okay, forget the fact that they're in Georgia, and let's make this work.
That's interesting because the first time I ever saw you guys in the field was a little living history we did in Georgia. I run with the Army Guards, and we had a little Browns Mill living history over in Noonan, Georgia, and it was so cool. I remember seeing like all the trailers come pulling in, and I was like, "Oh wow, this is a big operation about to happen here." And then when I saw you guys in the field, it was just a tiny little event. We had a small little skirmish, but I was so impressed. I remember like I was on the skirmish line, so we were Confederate skirmishers attacking the artillery detachment, and all I remember is I saw you guys riding the gun out, and the next thing I know, it's shooting at us, and I was just like, I didn't even see them on limber, or I was impressed just from a little bit I saw, and that kind of fascinated me from that standpoint. And I think you guys even had a tintype struck out there.
Yeah, we did. Yeah. Charleston tintypists took a tintype of it.
But I mean, that was like our third event or something.
Wow.
Something like that. I mean, you wouldn't, it's a very, young group. We haven't been around. Like I said, 2017 was the first time we ever worked together. But
awesome.
It's come a long way.
Yeah, I'll say, and I like how I wasn't able to make every event leading up to We Soon Got Proud, but I like how even at other events, whether it was you've had multiple events. I forget the names of some of them. You could correct me. I think there was the patrol was one.
Patrol in the park.
The park, yeah, and those. But like, even though those were separate events in a way, those were also rehearsals for We Soon Got Proud, just to kind of to flesh out things. Was that also a way to kind of figure out, can we do this on an even larger scale than what you did those weekends? Yeah.
Yeah, we were doing training weekends, and we were trying to work in training at like every event. So we were trying to get people to at least come to a training event. If you can't make a training event, come to one of the other events, and we'll get you some training at the park. Was actually a big training event for us. While it was an event, we did a lot of training there.
And one thing I also appreciated you all doing was the videos. You did a lot of video tutorials and training, and I rewatched those on repeat a few times leading up to the event, and that was great to have that as well. And just I loved how you did a condensed version. I mean, we all have to read the manuals and study up, but it's kind of like by just giving us the essential right there in a 10-minute video was really helpful. And I have to say, for both of you, you're also excellent teachers in some of these programs we've done. And Jeff, I appreciate you. You break it down very well for us when in those practice weekends, trying to understand everything. And before we kind of go into We Soon Got Proud, I wonder if Jeff, maybe in particular, you could remind me how many guns exactly we did have at We Soon Got Proud, and the type of guns we had. I think they were Napoleons and Parrots, and I'm not sure if there was other ones there. But if you could explain to our listeners before we go further in, just what a Napoleon and a Parrot is, and the type of guns that we had recreated there at the event.
Yeah. So really, in the Civil War, there are two types of artillery. There's heavy artillery. The giant guns you see at the forts, or they travel in siege trains with, long lines of draft horses. And then you have field artillery, and they are the ones that are moving around the battlefield, and that's primarily what we portray. So the gun types, two types of guns, either a smoothbore or a rifled gun. The Napoleons are some of the heavier guns. It's a 12-pound gun. And it's a smoothbore gun. And by 12 pounds, that designation comes from the fact that a solid iron ball, round ball out of that gun will be 12 pounds. So we had a couple of those at Sungapra that we fired. And then we had a 6-pounder, which we had a pair of 6-pounders. Same thing, fires a round iron, 6-pound iron ball. And then the other kinds of guns you have are the rifled guns. The Parrots and the ordnance rifles, primarily shooting a 10-pound mini ball shape, for just to oversimplify it, projectile. Tend to be moved ideally by 6 horses. Also can be moved by 4. 2 guns together constitutes a section. 2, 3, 4 sections together constitutes a battery. The term battery gets used a lot in the hobby. Most groups in the hobby call themselves a battery, whether it's 2 guys and a gun, or whether it's 100 guys and 6 guns. Where we use, and we call ourselves first section as opposed to a battery, because we didn't want to adopt the name of a group. For years and years in the hobby, everyone was like, well, we're the 4th Virginia, or we're the 27th Virginia, and it's like, well, do you ever portray them? So we went with a more generic thing. And
yes. Yeah.
We've a couple of times we've portrayed the same battery over and over, more than once, but we really try and, not do the same thing over.
It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. To have generic. So you could be US or CS and go wherever you want. First section, it's always going to be first section.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, like you said, there hasn't been many events too where we did have the potential of having a battalion of artillery like that, an event. And so I was there representing a section of the Barber battery. So that was I think we were left section of the Barber battery, and it wouldn't hurt, and I know you've done it a million times, but to also run down, I was number 4 on my crew, my detachment, and if you could run down the number of men attached to each gun, and maybe at least the top 4 positions and what those entail, and if you don't mind giving us a summary of that too.
Yeah. So one of the things that you don't really see at events, all events, I guess, is the building block of field artillery is a platoon. All right, so a platoon is going to be 1 gun and 1 caisson that go along with it, and then you've got 16 men. Ideally, you'd have 16 men and 13 horses. All right, so every gun you're looking at 13 horses and 16 men. You have a sergeant, chief of the piece. He's going to be in charge of that platoon, and he's mounted. That is a mounted position. Then you've got 6 drivers, a driver to a pair of horses, and Mike could talk a little about the driving and how that's done. But for each pair of horses, you have a driver. So for 12 horses, you've got 6 drivers, and then you have 2 corporals, a gunner, and who is the one who sights the piece. He's physically going to be the one who sights the gun, points the gun on target, will give the commands to fire. Your second corporal is your chief of the caisson, and he is responsible for the caisson. So the caisson's where you carry your separate ammunition from the gun. So, again, without getting too much into minutia. And then you have 7 cannoneers, and they are numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Odd numbers on the right, even numbers on the left, 1 and 2 at the front, 3 and 4 behind them. 5, 6, 7 are on the back, bringing the rounds up from the limber. 5 brings them up, 2 puts it in, 1 rams it down. 3 pricks the bag, 4 pulls the lanyard, the gun goes off. So that's the abbreviated version. If you want to put a link for the video we did on the basics of loading and firing, we did a video for that, like you said.
I'll be sure I'll have that in the notes for this podcast too, as well as a video of the event. And I'll be honest. Yeah, we kept, the way we were dry running it over and over again before we actually live fired at the event. Like, man, we fell into a trance of sorts where we all memorized our movements, and it's like and we'll talk more about it. But like, I appreciated. It just seemed like everybody was working so well, all the different detachments, and you just
Sure.
get really honed in. Like, like everything. The most important thing in the world was just us honed in on all of our parts and positions and not overriding one another and paying attention to all the little very crucial details. But but on the note, Mike, too, for the horse involvement, I'll be honest with you, and this is naive of me maybe going into the event, but I went into the event, I thought there was going to be a full team of horses for each gun at the event. And so when someone told me, like, "Are you kidding? Like, do you know how many horses that would be?" But like, I didn't know. I was like, I'm prepared to be blown away. Like, there might be like enough horses for each team, but if you could talk a little bit about that, and again, and talking on, I'm sure it takes, you have to. It takes a special horse to be able to do this type of work too, and
Yeah.
hauling these caissons, and maybe go over too just what that's like, and how many horses it does entail for an individual gun,
Right.
as well as harnessing them and running them in the field like that.
Typically, what you're going to see on pulling a gun or pulling a case on, it's six is ideal for the wartime scale. Six is what they prescribe in the manual. A lot of times that didn't happen for the Confederates. It can be done with four. You're not as fast, and you can't really go as far or as long. You don't have the range because you're pulling with four instead of six, but it can be done fairly well with four. And you also see the difference. It's a standard rule of thumb that's kind of been disproven a lot, but you see a lot, U.S. batteries were six horse teams with six guns, and CS batteries were four horse teams with four guns. It's not really true. It's kind of sort of true. But 4 to 6 is typically what you see on a gun. For we soon got proud. The what we were portraying and the time period, a lot of their horses had actually been sent away. So instead of keeping all the horses concentrated in one area and having to bring feed to them, one of Johnston's moves, he did a lot of furloughing. So he sent a lot of people out on furlough, and a lot of that was the horses. So he would send drivers, they would send drivers and horses home. It's like, take them home for the winter. You can stay home all winter, just make sure the horses get fed. And they weren't all back yet at the time period we were portraying. So the units, those three batteries, that battalion, they didn't have all their horses. They'd all been sent away. So it was perfectly legit for us to be short on horses. They just kept enough around to be able to move stuff around. And at the event, that's what we did. We had enough horses to move guns around and move wagons around and with the mules without being overly done. So that's one of the things we have to do, because that's really one of our limiting factors is the amount of horses that we have. Getting them trained up, getting them usable, finding people who want to drive, and back to first section. When we first came up with the name, we were comfortable we could put a section on the field. So it's like, let's just go with a section in the name somehow. And then as we've gone to do bigger units in a section, we try to pick out units that we can actually portray accurately with the number of horses we have. So we do a lot of undersized, understrength batteries. The Antietam event a couple years ago, it was a 3-gun battery. That's what they had. So we kind of portrayed that battery pretty much to a man and to a horse. We had the vehicles they had, the guns they had. So it was, when we hit the field, it was about as accurate as you could possibly get as far as numbers went. But yeah, typically horses continues to be one of our greater struggles.
But still, I'm fascinated again that you guys pay attention to every detail and you don't miss anything. Like, so, like, what from the outside, like, there's nothing that you guys have missed in a way. I mean, I'm sure might be a little thing here and there, but at the same time, you did research that not they didn't have a full team of horses there for every gun, and so that's fascinating to me that you did everything's on purpose. That was
Yeah.
all, that's remarkable to me. And I think another segue here for both of you is to talk about how we talked about the myth and the overbearing idea that like the artillery is just for the retired guys, and the guys that, like, and they don't do anything. They just sit around and drink beer and then shoot the guns, right? It looks very easy when you go to a mainstream event sometimes. But what I've come to find out doing a couple of events with you guys now is that there is a lot of work involved with doing artillery when you do it right. And there's a lot of physical strength involved, and you have to be ready to run with the horses. You got to be able to run with the Kazons, especially if you're a cannoneer like that. And also the taking care of the horses, limbering the guns. So you have to be in shape to do these events. And you guys called for that for We Soon Got Proud. It's like, look, be jogging, be walking, be ready for this ahead of time. And so if you could speak to that aspect of it, how there is a lot of work. It's not, to do artillery is not an easy thing when you do it right.
Yeah. So I won't make any friends with this comment, but the dirty little secret about artillery reenacting is in the hobby, there really is nothing to do. And I did this for years. And you show up at an event, you get up, you eat your breakfast, you drill for an hour or two, you relax, then you go out and you do the battle, then you eat, and then you drink, and then you do it again. There just simply isn't that much to do. And for a long time, the difference between the authentic groups in the hobby and the mainstream groups in the hobby is the authentic groups wore, better researched uniforms and equipment, had higher quality equipment, but they were still doing the same thing, and I'm not putting anybody down when I say that, I put together events like that too. They were all just, again, you get up, you do standing gun drill for an hour or two, and then you wait for the battle. And you don't have to read too many diaries and accounts and sketches and photos to see that's not really what artillery did. It moves, it moves itself, it repositions during battle. The idea of just one long gun line, how we've all seen it. It's one long line of guns. There are no horses, and they all shoot one at a time down the row, and then everybody cheers. And when you look at what happened in the 1860s, that's not how guns were used at these battles. That's not what was going on. And very much the idea was what can we do that's better? Even initially, okay, let's do this slightly better, and then let's do this a little more better. And it is hard work. I mean, there are people up all night watching the horses. There's just the forage that we have to move around. When we did the patrol, how many miles did we do, Mike?
I think it ended up being like 21 miles.
And it was out in the wilderness. And what I loved about that event especially is at some point in the event, you become mounted field artillery. You imagine that it's the 1860s, but you are functioning as...
We weren't reenacting a darn thing. We were we were moving as artillery.
You don't have to come up with this hokey first person discussions, because you have to talk about what you're actually doing. You have to have your axles greased and your horses harnessed right, and all of this stuff has to work, or the system breaks down. And it's those kind of events have nothing in common with the artillery that you see at most of the big events.
And
it's a challenge.
And Mike, I'm sure you could speak to how I think there's a temptation for a lot of young guys in the hobby, like they see cavalrymen on the field and it just looks so glamorous, and they don't think of the work that it takes keeping up with these horses. But on that side of things too, there's not much glamour with artillery horses and riding horses in artillery events, right? Like there's a lot more heavy lifting work involved.
Yeah.
And so if you could speak to that aspect too, things.
Yeah, it's definitely different. It's there's not the riding hard and fighting hard. And that's the reenactors, cavalry reenactors want that action. They want that, that feeling type of thing. It's more work. Artillery, like you said, when you're doing it right, it's a lot of work. And driving a team of horses pulling something isn't really glamorous. It's not as glamorous as being a cavalier on a mighty steed, so to speak. But it's also one of those things that, there's, couple dozen guys in the country that can do it. That's pretty much, that's an elite circle right there. There's very few people who can actually drive a team of horses hooked to another team of horses, hooked to another team of horses, pulling a cannon. I mean, there's us and there's those fellows in Britain that do it for the king or what have you. There's
there you
two groups in the world really that can do it on that level. And, so there's no cavalry can really stand up to that reputation, I guess.
Amen. And Mike, you still find a way to get some glamour shots on horseback, though, any event you're at, especially
we
for
try to, we try to get a few shots in here and there.
But nice.
But for the people who don't see what goes on behind the scenes, it is an insane amount of work. I mean, the site prep, all the equipment prep, invariably, and the research never stops. I mean, we've had pieces of harness, I think, that we've come up with, we've used for a couple of years, and then all of a sudden, through research, we're like, okay, that's wrong. Okay, we'll change it now.
We'll remake those.
Yeah, we'll remake those, and it goes on, all the time. You show up at this event and it's all magically there and it works. Let me tell you, for every hour in the field, there's hours and hours of prep that goes into it.
And I'd love to hear more about that prep, and the average estimated amount of people that it took to work to get that site prep, to get the equipment prepped and everything. But I love also how you guys, you have all the authentic tools and things that were needed, so you have the limbers full of tools and the actual equipment that they would have had in use. And I'm interested too, and you could correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure. I thought I heard that you guys even had a gun made for this event, but I know you made a lot of rounds, a lot of shells, and I wonder how many shells overall did you guys make for this event?
Boy, I'm trying to remember. I know each gun.
We fired over 100, but I think we had created slightly more than that to have some spares in case some didn't work. Because you get there and you have fitment issues that you don't spot during manufacturing, that they find out. They go to load it. It's like, we can't load this one. So they throw it aside and they grab another one. But I want to say it was over 100. It was over 100 rounds, and then we fired some canister on top of it.
Yeah. So we purchased the canister rounds. All the other rounds, the rifle rounds and the round balls, were all made, by people in this group, and that's, if that's what makes this group work, is there are people who are experts in every different thing. We got a guy that Craig Schneider is making saddles. Austin Fox in the group is, he's got a forge that he put together for us, and he's building carriages. And Mike, Dan Schmealer, and Kevin Oyarzo with the horses and getting all that into shape. We got my good friend Rick Bryan, who is casting the projectiles and milling the projectiles for us. It's all the different people bringing their skills in to make it work. And I will tell you, some groups in the past have benefited by the rich guy who foots the tab and, buys all the toys. We don't have that. it's a lot of, it's everyone chipping in what they can do and bringing their skill set to it. I can't. I'm not gonna come up with harness. I'm not gonna make a saddle. I'm not gonna train a horse to do it. But I do know how to go from a line of pieces into a column of sections into battery facing to the rear with the caissons passing. I do know how to do that. Everyone brings in what they know, and that's how it works. And I will say,
the Avengers of artillery, right?
Not
Yeah.
not to be too long-winded here, but there are people who have attempted this in the past by buying their way in. It's like even I said before. I said, well, what would I do if I had $1 million? Well, I'd do this. But I don't have $1 million, and yet we've managed to do this. And if it was just somebody with $1 million, like where would you start? Where is the expertise? It's just kind of magic that this has come together and succeeded the way it has. So.
Yeah, you can't hire people to do this, even if you had the $1 million. There's to find the people that are interested. You've got to find the people that are interested, the people that geek out over the minutia of it, and that want to do it. And we've kind of come up with that. We've got researchers, we've got builders, we got horse people, we got gun guys, we've got instructors, we've got planners, we've got logistics team, and a lot of that was in existence. Like I said, Dan Schmealer and I were just two horse guys wandering around shopping different artillery groups trying to find cannoneers, and we stumbled into these guys. They already had a logistics thing set up. I mean, Craig Schneider, and Brian Koenig and Jeff Baldwin and Kevin Ayarza, they already had it pretty much licked in the, making it happen on the field stuff. So didn't have to recreate the wheel there. And, it doesn't work if we don't have all of these people with all their little individual specialties. We've managed to attract, and we didn't have everything we needed when we started. We got started and we're doing pretty good, and we attracted a bunch of people we didn't even know we needed. So it's kind of worked out the last year or so. We've got people that are had no idea we existed 5 years ago, who are like a vital part of what we do now. So it's going pretty good.
Yeah.
So with that being said, with We Soon Got Proud behind us, how proud are both of you over the event itself and the participants, and how do you feel, and what impressed you both about it? What amazed you? This is something that you both envisioned for so long to see happening. What struck you the most? And were you fascinated? Were there a lot of surprises for you all, in a way, of either guys that you didn't expect to be great horsemen or great cannoneers at that event? Or I'd love to hear your takeaways from it.
Well, Mike, you go ahead. You really were instrumental in putting this one together.
Yeah, I mean, this like I said, Jeff and I were talking about bucket list events at one time, and then Andrew Jerem and I were in Gettysburg getting ready for that Gettysburg event a couple years ago, and we were like, we need something in Georgia, and we started talking about bucket list type stuff, and I was like, well, Jeff and I were talking about a live fire thing, and it was like, well, let's see what we can do, and it kind of grew from there. We talked briefly about it at Gettysburg with Jeff, and then we came back and started looking into it. And the thing I was most impressed with was the firing line. The amount of focus and professionalism on that firing line was amazing. I mean, I remember seeing you and your guys and everybody else out there, and everybody was just super focused on, I got to do this right. I got to do this right. I've never seen reenactors so focused. And Jeff made me go to a live fire shoot last year, because I'd never been to a live fire shoot before. It was the Pelham shoot over in Tennessee, and there's a certain amount of joking around there because those guys do it all the time. But there's you're firing live rounds, so there's that certain amount of you got to take it seriously. And I've never seen that at a reenactment. I mean, a lot of artillery guys take themselves way too seriously, but the guys on that firing line were so professional, and so it looked like soldiers at target practice as far as I'm concerned. I mean, I don't think that was my Civil War moment for the weekend was, all right, these guys are in it. This is actual target practice. This is Johnston's artillery right here. He's sent them out to train, and they're taking it seriously, and they're out here training. So that was the big thing for me. No real big standouts. We knew, I mean, even when we named it, we knew it was something we were going to be proud of, and we were bouncing around lots of different names, and the name actually comes from Company H. Watkins is talking about when Johnston takes over the Army, and it's not artillery specific. He kind of goes on to, Johnston restored pride to the soldier's bosom, and he goes on and on and on. And then one of the lines in there is, we soon got proud. And I was like, that one's pretty good, and I think we're going to be pretty proud of this one. And everybody's like, I like it. I like it a lot, so that's what we went with. But yeah, I can speak for both Jeff and I think we're very proud of how this went. And it's going to be hard to top.
It was another one. It was an event that, it seemed very real because it was real, and the communications with, all of the guys, we had prior to the event, you got to tell this is going to be different than what you've done before. When you go to move a limber chest, it's going to weigh about 400 pounds more than what you're used to. How many reenactors are opening a limber chest and there's, a couple dozen fixed rounds, 50, 60 pounds of powder in the box. And then when you're on the line and you go to shoot, it's real. You don't have to imagine, I wonder what this would be like. This is what it was like. And, we're not, and I think when you had Craig Schneider and Mike Clark on from the Liberty Rifles to talk about this kind of thing, you talk about, you can't really recreate combat. We've done some force on force events and we've had a good time with it, and we do some of that occasionally. But you're left to imagine what the battle is like. Here we were doing an artillery battalion doing target practice, and it was us doing target practice. And what I loved is standing on the firing line, and looking. We had 6 guns at once, all firing. And I could see, up and down, everyone doing it correctly, everyone taking it seriously, because it was serious. Everything out there was real. And I think it was Connor Timoney that made the comment that this was my Make-A-Wish event, and this was my Make-A-Wish. I mean, this was just a couple years ago, this would have just been impossible. Mm-hmm. It just, again, for those of you who missed it, I don't know when we're going to do this again. This is not, and I try and tell people this, as it relates to all of our events. If don't think, well, I'll get the next one.
Yeah, it might not be.
It just, I mean, just the man hours and the site prep and the target building and the rounds. I mean, it was just
amazing,
and it came together on a beautiful day.
I'm proud to have been a participant in it because I knew it was something. This is going to be something people are going to be talking about, and you'd be crazy if you missed it. So I had to be part of it, and I'll be honest with you. I've been nervous and afraid at events before, whether it was thinking that you were going to freeze to death at night or melt in the summer heat, but I've never had the fear of just, we're using the real stuff. And so all of us, me and all my pards, during the whole process, I mean, more serious than any other event we've been to. And also, we had the beads of sweat running down, like, and all of us were so honed in. But what struck me was, like, when we were done with our rounds firing, just the sigh of relief that came from all of us that nothing stupid happened, nothing damaging happened. I mean, to us, and the trees got damaged, but no, but like we were hugging each other, like it felt like we had just survived the battle, kind of thing. And the added effect that I'm so glad that we did is because we were so honed in and focused when we're firing. I kind of forgot just what's happening on the other end. We're firing, and then when we're done and the smoke clears and we walk down range. And that's where it really became real for me because, we saw the targets and I think my section, we hit 5 out of 8, maybe, I think is our tally, what we hit in Barber, my section. But I think some guys did a lot better than that. But when we got past the targets, that's where it got real for me. When we see felled trees, we see holes in trees, and we see trenches made from the cannonballs and then seeing how far back beyond the targets these things were landing. Guys were scurrying up the hillside trying to find what shells and artillery they could. And but then that's when I realized, okay, like I would not want to be anywhere near the receiving end of this. And it helped me understand. I mean, all of us understand in our reading and writing and researching, but it's like when you see it, though, like if I was an infantry line advancing across the battalion, we had to I mean, you imagine guys running away from that. Like, it's insane.
So the very first time I did live fire, I remember my first reaction was, okay, these are more accurate than I thought. And I think a lot, you think, you're just lobbing these cannonballs, and they are accurate. There's guys that are hitting pizza box size targets at 1,000 yards. And I think, if there's one thing that I could communicate to event organizers in the hobby is go out and try and, do an event like this or do a live shoot with the NSSA or something. And when you add the artillery component to your event, keep that in mind, because we've all seen these events where, gun lines are a few hundred yards apart, or, you see these where the guns are pointed at, long lines, 300-400 yards apart. At that range, you're picking, individual people to shoot. It's not, the one thing that even the mainstream hobby could do to kind of improve these things a little is separate your gun lines, put things further out, appreciate what these guns do. At Soon Got Proud, we were shooting from the same position that we had occupied for the Rosecrans. Was it Rosecrans Pursuit?
Rosecrans, yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the targets were where the Confederates had been set up for that event. And I think, the people who had attended both events, you start to appreciate, well, shooting at the Confederates as they were digging, every round would have hit them. So, even at 400 or 500 yards, I mean, that's 400 yards is point blank for most of those guns.
Yeah.
So,
did one of the sections hit 8 out of 8 targets, or I'm curious, did anyone do perfect?
I think Clayton Barker hit every one of them on target with Napoleon, and Jackson Grissom. I think he did almost everyone. And talk about putting competent people in these places. I'd worked with Clayton Barker for years doing events, but Jackson Grissom, it was the first. He had done one drill weekend with us. He wasn't a member of the Liberty Rifles. He'd never done anything first section. I kind of seen him on Facebook, good impression, and all the pictures where he's doing artillery, I kind of seek these people out, and he kind of, sought us out. And, I say, before we're going to put you in one of these positions, we need people to come to our drill weekends. And he did come to one of them, and, I'm very impressed with him. So we made him a gunner, and steps up, first time shooting a cannon, and just nailed it. And and talk about moments of the event. I'm watching some of these guys, who are gunners who've never done this before, and they're hitting the target. And
it was good.
What a feeling for everybody.
Andy McKeegan was one of my gunners, and he hit the first 4 in a row. He called, and so it was something.
Yeah, I think I told people, that when you hit a target and immediately everyone wants to start cheering, but you got to keep it focused. You got to stay in line. And of course, they hit the target. And I'm up there cheering. You can't.
Oh yeah, everybody was cheering.
But like you said, everyone had to keep it focused because it's, I'm not gonna lie. This is, I'm not gonna say it's inherent, a danger. What's, it's dangerous. Riding a motorcycle is dangerous.
Yeah.
It is. But the horses
you can fall out of your boat fishing and drown, though. Everything's dangerous.
Yeah.
I have 2 rules that I always post on every event page before we go, to the participants. I say, nobody gets blown up and nobody gets run over. And, I say it to be funny, but it's serious. You can't, even the cannoneers on the ground, you're in and out between horses, and there are horse problems to untangle. And, you have to stay on it. You have to stay aware of what's going on, and people who can't do that don't get invited back. I mean, it's just there's too many moving pieces to worry about. And you talked about being nervous. I was nervous. I'm nervous at every event. I mean, it's just I'm just trying to watch everyone. But it's a good group of guys. I know in the parking lot Friday before we soon got proud. Tim Tedrick comes up to me and says, "Hey, I got a group of guys here who are ready to start drilling in the parking lot." And it's like, good, yes, go drill. People were going to take it seriously, but that's what it takes. That's what it takes.
Yeah, we drill a lot for a reason.
Yeah,
we
it shows.
Fully understand that reenacting artillery is dangerous. Doing things with horses is dangerous. Live-firing artillery is, so when you add all of those things up, it's like, we got to drill, we've got to practice. It's kind of like the old firefighter mentality, practice type of stuff.
What amazed me was we're all shooting these guns at the same time, and never once did my team get confused or we mishear the guys next to us. All I heard was the guys next to me, even though we have all this commotion going on, and someone had the idea of doing that where each command, before the preparatory command, we would say like Barbara left, Barbara right, to differentiate. Or like if Nottoway was on our left, we'd hear like Nottoway left, and so we heard those trigger words, and not once did we mishear another order to fire or another order for ready next to us. To me, that's impressive, and I don't know how that was able to accomplish, but there was no crossover confusion, and I appreciate that part too. But a
lot of planning and a lot of drilling. We really said a minute ago. We've had people show up to events, who haven't been to one of our drill weekend, but I really discourage that. I'm going to put you in the back. We get a lot of people who say, well, I know the drill, I'm with another group. I know. And it's like, well, frequently people say, I know the drill. Well, most of the rest of the hobby is that consists of loading and firing, and it's a lot more than that. When you've got caissons going around pieces, you're doing wheels going into battery, and it's a lot to look out for.
Well, you can read all you want, but doing is a whole other story. And on that note, honestly, going back to the reading and research, I'd love to hear from both of you. Do you have some recommended reading materials, resources that you both have come across, whether it's firsthand accounts by artillerymen and drivers and cannoneers, or even some of your personal favorite accounts that you stumbled upon to learn more about? Because I'm sure you guys are going to those original sources a lot, to hear from the men themselves who did it. The diaries and accounts of these actual artillery batteries.
Yeah. So as everyone who knows me knows that the first thing I'm going to suggest is
Manual.
instruction for field artillery. That's it comes out written up in 1859. I think the first publication 1860. It's republished in a bunch of different forms throughout the war, but that's kind of the tome that guides everything. Beyond that, I really have to recommend Hardtack and Coffee by John Billings. That he was 10th Massachusetts light artillery. We've done some winter quarters events where we base a lot on some of the things that he described, and just
he has so many sketches too.
And the sketches, and the sketch. I believe the sketches were done by the bugler for that unit, or I know he was also the person who did the sketches.
Was it Charles Reed? Charles Reed,
so.
was it? Yeah,
I think so. But beyond that, like you said, I am really big on diaries. Less. I mean, other than Hardtack and Coffee, less on some of the things that were written in the 1880s and 90s, where things maybe get embellished or changed. But the actual, I think all of us in the group, I read these diaries, and every now and then I'll hit an entry in the diary, and I think, oh, that's an event, because again, most, they weren't fighting these battles every day. It was just the little vignettes of what they do, whether it's again winter camp,
stories on the march or stories in camp like that.
And I do, I always make a note. It's like, oh, there might be an event here. One of the events that we're going to do next year, we're going to do federal artillery at Manassas for the NPS, and it's going to be in October. Well, Manassas had 2 battles, neither of which were in October. So I happened to be going through a diary, and I found a group that on the Bristow campaign that had pulled back and was resupplying, and they went to Manassas, and they were right there at Bull Run, and you see that, and it's like, okay, there's an event. So I'm big on the diaries.
Awesome. How about you, Mike? Do you have some personal favorite accounts that you've stumbled upon?
It kind of varies from event to event, just like anything else. The like Jeff said, the manual and Hardtack and Coffee are probably the 2 best things. I know before when we started doing research for We Soon Got Proud, I think we were all reading Cannoneers in Gray. Which was pretty good for that theater, and it really just varies. Back to our, we've got a bunch of people who are really good at stuff. We've got like group chats where it's like, hey, who was that guy that said that thing about that thing one time? And somebody says, oh, that was the lieutenant in that Boston unit over in, and it's like, and then 5 minutes later, we've got that quote, and we're like, yeah, that would be what we need to do, type of thing. So we've got a lot of guys who, Brian Koenig is really good at that. It's like, Brian, who was the guy that said that? And he's got it on like the tip of his brain. It's like, oh yeah, that was this guy from such and such, and he did this, that, and the other thing. So having people who know all that stuff comes in really handy. But yeah, the two best are really the manual. The manual tells you, if you want to know how to train an artillery horse, go to the manual. It actually tells you how to train horses for the artillery. When we first started training horses, we just pulled out the manual. It's like, okay, it says to do this next. So the manual really is, it's got a lot of holes and you have to figure a lot of stuff out. We've had to go and find other manuals, like stable manuals of the period, to find out what the heck they're talking about sometimes, because it's common knowledge to them and you don't know what they mean. But I think the manual is probably going to be the best resource pretty much every time.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And it's just amazing the amount of reading resources we do have access to. And And again, yeah, all those firsthand accounts of artillerymen that you get those full details, and I love that how just reading through the accounts and stumbling upon an entry that that could be a future event, because it seems like you could never really run out of ideas. There's so many accounts that have yet to be read, and so there's always a potential for something else down the road, a new location, a new thing to recreate, which fascinates me. And so I, for one, am excited about what you guys have cooking down the road, because and I'm sure there's a lot more added interest now honed in on what you guys are doing. But
Absolutely.
awesome. But I do have to ask you, my show is called Civil War Regiments, and I always like to ask my guests, but like, do either of you, and your long love for history, is there any pet regiments that you both have frequented, or whether artillery, infantry, or cavalry? Is there anything that you just go back to a lot, or resources that you go back to a lot for a particular regiment?
I think back in like the 125th, we were talking about this earlier, how anybody who was artillery was like, oh, we're such and such battalion or battery or what have you. They always pick a big name, and I was an infantry reenactor back then, and everybody kind of picked a regiment. So we're this regiment or that regiment, and we were in. I was a Florida reenactor, so South Florida. So we picked. We decided to Union because there were too many people doing Confederate, and they needed more Yankees anyhow. So we zeroed in on the 115th New York, and they actually had a regimental history published, so that made things easier. So that's probably the one that I've got the most research in, because we before events we'd Xerox copy those things back in the day and hand them out to people at unit meetings and say, okay, this is what we're going to be doing, and this is what they did, and this was their thought process, and this is where they were at. And so that one's probably the one I've got the most honed in experience. But it was, like I said, it was just reenacting in the 80s. We were the 115th New York Regiment, all 36 of us,
Yeah, there's a lot of pride in that.
Yeah. 36.
Were they at Alesti? Was the 115th? Were they at the actual Battle of Alesti?
Yeah, they were. They were actually. Yeah. It was. They were part of Barton's brigade. It was the 47th, the 48th, and 115th New York. So it was 3 New York regiments in that brigade, and they're kind of like a hard luck regiment. They kind of they got brought into service, and then they got surrendered at Harper's Ferry before they even got a chance to fire a shot, type of thing, and then. They had to go wait to be paroled and what have you. And, by the time they got down to Alesti, they were just so bitter. They were marching across the field at Alesti screaming, Harper's Ferry, Harper's Ferry. Because they were still mad about it.
Yeah.
But we picked them so we could portray somebody in Florida that was actually in Florida, type of thing back in the day.
Smart. What about you, Jeff? Do you have a particular favorite?
We've done a couple of units that we've done more than once, and the one of them that I really love was the Fluvanna Artillery of Virginia. We did 2 winter quarters of them, events for them. Where they were between Charlottesville and Waynesboro, Virginia. In winter of 64, 65. They were primarily a artillery reserve unit. They're at Gettysburg. They never fire a shot. And you kind of follow, they weren't always on the front line. They weren't always, involved in these things, but just, they were there. They were doing it. They get to Cedar Creek and they're overrun and they lose their guns. So, when they go into winter quarters, their horses are all starving to death. The horses are all sent on what Mike was talking about, the horse furlough. They keep just enough horses in camp that winter to be able to move a couple of guns around. They leave that winter quarters. They go to Waynesboro in the battle. I think they fire 1 shot and they just surrender. Because we're looking to do event. We're never going to have 100 horses, so I'm looking for these vignettes that we can do where they don't have horses, and then you study them over and over again, and you really get a feel for these guys. So the Fluvanna Artillery is one, hard luck group, but I've really enjoyed following. The other one is Johnson's Bedford Artillery, which we did at Antietam for the 150th, and then we did them for an event we did a couple years ago called Turning the Guns, where that was the Bedford Artillery and the 21st Georgia Infantry, a company of them, and we had found a vignette where the company of infantry was taught how to run the guns, so that if they captured guns during an engagement, that company of infantry could take over the guns. But and there are two Bedford artilleries. This one is Johnson's battery, and again they were, I think their officer, their captain was out of favor with Ewell, and at one point, early on, their horses were taken away from them, and I think they missed most of the Peninsula campaign. Their horses and guns are taken away. They have to go back to Richmond, completely start over again, acquiring the horses and equipment. They go to Antietam where they're engaged. A month later, the Confederate artillery is reorganized, and they go out of business. They are disbanded. But at their height, 3 guns, 2 6-pounders, and a field howitzer, very few horses, under strength on men, and you see that, it's like, oh, we can do that, and we did, and that's I scour trying to find we try and find every bit of paperwork, everything they may have. I bet
it's hard with Confederate artillery to find many accounts from those units too.
And again, especially the ones like this, there's no dramatic narrative, of fighting to the last man. I enjoy, I don't want to say some of the more mundane units. That's because they were there and they were veterans and they suffered casualties, but those are the 2 units that I've because we have portrayed them, that I find myself going back over and over and reading everything I can find, and I'd like to portray them again at some point. So.
Well, you also make a good point that when studying Confederate artillery units, you have to be aware of the multiple names associated, because for CS batteries, like I've come across my own research, they're known by, it's either going to be Bedford Artillery or Johnston's Battery, and it might be the same exact unit, and then but they're referred to differently in a report or an entry somewhere, and so that always would confuse me a few times, because you'd see just Virginia Battery listed so many times in order of battle, and you're like, which Virginia Battery, like whose battery, and so that's always a confusing aspect to me in the research. But guys, we're winding down really here. I want to thank both of you for your time with me tonight and deep diving into this event. And it fascinated me just to hear, the behind the scenes, work, and also the great efforts and the amount of people that it takes to make these events possible. But with all that being said, do either of you have any parting thoughts about this point in the hobby and the work that you guys are doing and the work you have for the future?
If you have horses or mules, get in touch with us.
This
looks like something you would be interested in. We can, we are. That's kind of our limitation. I could probably field 200 guys and 15 cannons, but we're always looking for more horsepower.
Nice.
Pretty much. We need horses. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I, for one, I'm looking forward to what's ahead, and whether it's on a smaller scale, we soon got proud, whatnot. I look forward to it either way, because that was really a treat and something that everyone that took part in we're not soon going to forget. So I want to remind everyone watching and listening that I'm going to have all these resources in the show notes. I'm going to link up the videos of some of these events, and also the links to some of these drill manuals and tutorial videos that you guys have put out, and some of these books that we mentioned. And so stay tuned for all of that. And I want to thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mike, again for joining me tonight.
And thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And thank you all for watching and listening, and stay tuned for more content down the road. But with that being said, good evening, everyone.
Good night.